Oh my gosh, you guys, I just had a birthday and I'm still recovering, so bear with me. Welcome back to Hot Topics Live podcast. By the way, if you don't know me by now, I'm Kia, and today we are talking about something so important, but you don't think it is, or you might not think it is. But if you don't, or if you do, stay till the end because this episode is one you don't want to miss. We are talking about something that is so life changing that you can't even begin to comprehend how life changing it's about to be for you. And I'm here to help you. And I have someone with me. Don't trust my word. Trust his word, and he's going to break it down for you. But before I do, I want to give a shout out to my sponsor, Mental Health Code. So, thank you for sponsoring this episode, Mental Health Code. They do not want anything from you at this time. Okay. But just go follow them on Instagram. They're doing good work. They're helping people. They're focused on mental health. And if you want to do one of their courses or whatever they're offering over there, then definitely jump in. But tell them Kia sent you and support the mission. Thank you again to Mental Health Code for sponsoring this episode. We are talking about digital assets today. Mhm. You want to know what that is. It's going to affect your life before you know it. Okay, my guest today is an extraordinary human being, first and foremost. So I am so blessed to have good people. Like I keep coming into contact with these extraordinary people, and I brought one for you today. This person is going to help you like open your eyes in a way that you can't even believe just yet. So you better keep watching. Also, if there's anything about this episode that you like, share, comment, definitely engage, subscribe first and foremost, because so many people are watching this podcast now that are not subscribed. Know who you are. So subscribe. And now, let me tell you about my guest. So his name is Camille. He is one of the founding members of my mastermind group, the Emperors and Empresses of DeFi, which is about digital finance, right? And I know half of you watching right now go, oh my God, that's a scam. Just wait. Stay with me. Stay with me. Just let us try to convince you. So keep an open mind. So Camille has been working in IT forever. Okay, but he is also one of the lead instructors at London Rail Academy, which I worked at for a very long time, and is a passionate place for me because they're teaching people really, really important things. And that's where I coached for many, many years and learned how to facilitate and do all these things. And so right now, Camille is guiding very high level investors through early stage investments. Okay, I'm talking equity, I'm talking new technology, and high level investors are investing in this stuff. And this gentleman, who is my guest today, just holds their hands, explains everything to them, teaches them about portfolio management, teaches them about how and why and when to do things in this digital asset space. So he is knowledgeable beyond belief. He has guided me, he has guided everyone in our mastermind group to success in one thing or another. And today he's going to guide you. So stay tuned and welcome my guest, Camille.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Kia. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
I'm so glad that you came because I have been talking about this little by little over the years of doing this podcast. And I didn't know anything about it when I first started. And so I've been bringing guests on a couple times a year to talk about it because as I've learned more and more and more and became so much more knowledgeable in this space, I feel like it is my obligation to share this information with people to help them. But I'm also aware that there's so much fear about this space. And I want to just try to help people understand, first and foremost, what this is and why they should get involved with it. So, can you help us with understanding what exactly digital assets or cryptocurrency and all this is?
Oh, great topic, vast topic. I hope we have 2 hours ahead of us.
We'll do our best.
We'll do our best, absolutely. Your audience deserves it. So the first thing I'd say is you hit it on the head when you say it's really fear that holds us back. And as humans, we really fear what we don't understand. So the advice I gave every one of my friends, the advice I gave myself when I started in this whole journey a few years ago, 5, 6 years ago, it was to conquer that fear by conquering knowledge. And I really went deep into it before I put my first euro anywhere. Right, since I live in Spain, so I spend in euros, guys. Essentially, I started taking up everything I could find online to understand what the keywords were, who were the main influencers. This is the easy onboarding. And then when I understood how the whole sector was shaped, I went into reading books, because the advantage of reading a book is it will present the knowledge in a pre-formatted way that will make you able to understand it deeper. So that's my first recommendation. Do a bit of research, maybe ChatGPT, something to get in touch with the topic, and read a couple books, because having this foundation will protect you against many mistakes and potentially bad actors out there. You will spot them a mile away. So in terms of digital assets, what I can say is to understand what they are, starting with Bitcoin, which we can see here in the back, is that it's an answer to a problem. And so you can't understand Bitcoin if you don't understand the problem. Right? So before I got into the reason I was attracted to Bitcoin, although a few years after it came out, is because I understood monetary policy, I understood macroeconomics, and this is why I could see how this would be an elegant answer to many problems we have as small economic actors. And essentially, when Bitcoin was founded in 2010, we were just out of the nastier effects of the 2008 crisis. Right, so Satoshi Nakamoto, in the group that was debating Bitcoin on 4chan at the time, I believe, they decided to, after much talk and discussions, they decided to come up with a digital solution because it would be portable, transparent, and so everyone could audit it at no cost or almost no cost. There is no barrier to entry when it comes to looking at what's happening on chain. This is basically trying to encompass all the qualities of gold and other reserves of value we know, but giving it the advantages of the digital world, which has its merits. So they decided to create Bitcoin in a way that few people know nowadays. But at the time, they created a blockchain, which was programmed to emit 21 million Bitcoin in total over the infinity of time. And the reason they did this way is because each Bitcoin is also composed of 1 million parts, which we call Satoshis, in honor to the founder, Satoshi Nakamoto. I should say the creator more than the founder. And the reason they did it this way is because 1 million Satoshis per 21 million Bitcoin represented almost the entire dollar supply available at the time, according to the Federal Bank reports. So you basically have a fixed point in time in 2010 where Bitcoin is fixed with a certain quantity. And if adopted, which it is being adopted, as we can see in the price action, represents the true thermometer, right? You have the true temperature. So when you're looking at a chart of Bitcoin price, you're looking at the adoption, the emotion around it, hence the volatility. But what you're looking at over long periods of time is how much the dollar is being inflated versus what it was in 2010. This is what Bitcoin is at its core, right? And then you have amplification effect from the adoption. The faster the adoption, the more it decouples. But it is a true instrument of measure against the dollar at its core. So once I understood this, I decided to go with my own money into the space. And understanding the Bitcoin protocol, I was able then to understand others. And then there are many names out there. You must probably have heard of Ethereum and maybe XRP lately, Cardano if you're a tech fan. There's Solana probably. There's so many. But really, what I would encourage everyone to do, if this is you're dipping your toe in the pool, study Bitcoin. Just study Bitcoin. Ignore the rest at first. And once you have your head around Bitcoin, everything else will become much clearer.
Okay, so my big takeaway from that is study Bitcoin, right? Mm-hmm. There's many ways to learn, but spoiler alert, I have created an ebook it is going to drop soon. So if you have no freaking clue what we're talking about right now and you're trying, like, you want to know, or you're like, well, I just want a guide to help me, sort of a quick start guide to help me get involved in this before it's too late, then that's what that ebook will aim to do. And today it's not linked in the description, but it will be. So you'll have to come back and check. And then it'll be linked in upcoming episodes as well in the description of each episode. But one of the things that I cover in that book is my next question for you. You mentioned the blockchain. And if I didn't know anything at all about this space, I would be thinking to myself right now, what is a blockchain?
That's a very good question indeed. So if you think of a traditional application or a traditional network, for anyone that has a basic IT knowledge, your application is the part of the software you will interact with as a human. Right? We'll have fields, we'll have buttons. This is your application. This is the interface with your application. And every time you do something, it essentially turns into a command that goes into, let's call it the system for the sublayer. And in order to work, it needs to call on data or send data to a record. And whether it pulls or overwrites on that record, this all goes into the database. So in the traditional IT world, the database is centralized, meaning there is one actor that will have access to that database, will decide the rules of that database, what can be changed, who can access, and what type of data you can enter there. And so that person, if you use their application, you have to trust implicitly that that party having access to the database will be honest for the purpose of the application. When you do it over a network, everybody essentially agrees to use the same protocol, saying that if I use my Instagram all over the world, well, Instagram owns all the databases that hold your data, all the users of Instagram around the world. So that's why when you travel, you don't lose, unless the country has a firewall, you won't lose access to the content, and it will always be presented the same way, right? But in some other applications, financial ones, for example, if you have a Revolut, when you travel, some services, if you change your fiscal residency, you will realize very quickly that some services are available in one area and they're not in the other one, because the legislation is different and the application needs to reflect that. With Bitcoin in particular, and the vast majority of cryptocurrencies, this database is decentralized, meaning that you don't have a single party or a small amount of parties controlling the database. Everybody is essentially having the entire record of what's happening in the network and their own server, if you run a server, which we call a node. So every node on Bitcoin replicates the entirety of the ledger, as we call it, which is the historic amount or series of transactions that have happened over the blockchain. The blockchain being none other than all this mesh network of nodes communicating with each other at all times to validate that the data, the vision of the history of the ledger that they have matches the one that you see in the other node and that other node and so on. Pretty much like the honeycomb I have behind me. Every bee could essentially represent a node, and they constantly talk to each other to make sure that they have the same single version of the truth.
So before you go on, I have a question. Okay, so basically, one of the primary functions of this blockchain is to keep a record of every transaction that is done on it, on the servers, right? So there's a history. Now, I just want to make that clear because it's like accounting. So I studied accounting in my master's program. And as you know, we have a ledger. And for any business owner out there, you keep a ledger or a journal of all your transactions, your expenditures, and all of that stuff. So if you understand that this blockchain is a record, you can understand how it can be viewed as safe, right? Because we're keeping records of every transaction that happens, right? So I think that's important for people to understand, because a lot of times there's this misconception that it's just not, it's just empty, I guess I would say, and that there's no way, nothing you can trust in or nothing you can believe in. But really, it's actually eventually will probably be safer because there's an actual history of all the transactions, and you can look back and see what transactions you've made as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right to point this out. The whole point of this is exactly, thank you for the transition. It's exactly where I was going. The whole point of doing this is to establish trust. You don't need to trust blindly. You can verify. And this is the key aspect of it. If you look at your bank account, you have to trust that your bank will at all times reflect your actual balance and make it available to you, right? So your bank needs to give you permission and permission to transfer and access to the information. The blockchain is often referred to as something distributed because everybody can validate that ledger. And so your account on it is also validated as the outcome. But also it's permissionless. No central actor can decide that they don't like you or what you're doing with your Bitcoin and block your transaction. It's impossible. It's technically impossible. And this is the big difference. Again, it was created to solve an issue or a problem, and the problem was the 2008 crisis. In many countries, bank accounts were drained by the banks to basically recapitalize themselves. Accounts were frozen. Right? Remember Greece, at some point, people could only withdraw €50 per week. And we're talking about the Eurozone already at the time. So this is not just an experiment. It's really a response that has been technically made using years and years of study of and available technology on cryptography and distributed networks. So on Bitcoin, if you feel techie, you can read the white paper. Everything is there. It has evolved a little bit since then, but this core aspect of it has been left untouched. This is why it's the granddaddy of crypto.
Okay, so we understand what a blockchain is, right? And now let's talk about Bitcoin itself. We know that it's Satoshis, and the Satoshis make up a Bitcoin. I like to say it's not exactly the same, but just for the sake of explanation, I like to tell people to think of it like $100 bill. So it's not the equal measure of currency, so don't get confused. But we're just, for example, saying $100 bill. And if one Bitcoin was $100 bill, then the Satoshis would be all the $1 bills that make up that $100 bill. Okay, so Bitcoin is spendable like $100 bills would be. So that's an important understanding to have as to one reason why you would want to have it. Okay. Now, one of the first questions I was ever asked by someone when I told them that I was working with digital assets and teaching people how to invest and how to create a portfolio or add digital assets to their existing portfolio, because we know that it shouldn't be your whole portfolio. I mean, unless you're that person, right? Like you're going there, but it should be part of your portfolio. For example, with your real estate assets, if you are lucky enough to have these kind of assets, right? We'll talk about people who can't have or don't have those later, so stay tuned. But if you are a person who is able to have real estate in your portfolio, and you have stocks in your portfolio, and maybe you have precious metals in your portfolio, so you have this portfolio of different things, right? It's diverse, it's diversified. You also want to have a percentage of your portfolio in digital assets. So as I was trying to explain this to a dear friend of mine, okay, the question that I was asked, and I'm going to ask it to you to explain, is why would I want a digital currency? Why would I want this Bitcoin? If I have a stock, I get a stock certificate. But what do I get if I buy a Bitcoin?
Yes, indeed. So being digital, 100% digital, it's true that you never get a piece of paper, title of property, anything against it that you can take with you to the bank, so to speak. But what you get is the digital equivalent. the reason we went over the blockchain is because once you understand what the blockchain is, for Bitcoin specifically, you have your digital representation of that Bitcoin is the property, right? So when you own the property of that Bitcoin, technically what happens is you will have it in a private wallet, right? So I don't want to get too technical here. There are different types of wallets, but let's say you go down the rabbit hole and eventually you understand that you can take your Bitcoin from the exchange where you buy it and hold it in your own wallet that you secure yourself. Well, being able to show the Bitcoin available on that address, which would be your account on the Bitcoin network, and showing that you have the private key to that address, which is what your wallet holds and secures. That private key essentially says, Camille owns that Bitcoin because he's the one that has the cryptographic key, allowing him to transfer all of it or part of it to anyone else on the network. So owning that private key is your title of property. And what you have as a Bitcoin visible on the blockchain is yours. This is not a representation, it is the property itself. So it's really property in cyberspace, as Michael Saylor puts very well, all over the net. So that's one thing. That's a misconception that you will see a lot out there if you start investigating. People tend to think that the wallets hold the crypto. They don't. Your crypto lives on chain. It lives in the network that secures it, that establishes the protocol for it. What you hold in your wallet are your private keys, which is your title of property and your key to unlock the right to transfer your assets.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So that clearly explains how you own it. And that's really important. So again, what is a wallet and what do you do with it and how do you set it up is all in my ebook. Okay. So by the way, I forgot to mention that ebook is $10. So it's for that amount of money, the information that you get and the potential for its ability to change your life and your wealth, it's an unreasonably low price. but I feel like if you don't charge people something, they won't learn. Like they have to get skin in the game, as Brian says, in order, Brian Rose from London Real Academy, to actually really value this. And so I think that's really important. So a lot of these things that you're like, well, what is this? What is that he's talking about is going to go into a little bit more detail in that ebook. So stay tuned for that. Okay. So let's move on to the next question I have for you. Okay. So we discussed how you actually own the Bitcoin, right? So, but is it safe? Isn't it like the wild, wild west? These, like, I didn't even want to put cryptocurrency as in the word at any point of like the title of this episode or in the description of the episode, really, although I did, but I was hesitant. And that hesitancy comes from this sort of feeling that it's a scam. And I understand that it's a little bit like the wild, wild west. So how do we, it's because it's so new and there are a lot of bad actors, as you mentioned before. So how do we enter this space and keep ourselves safe? How do we not get robbed when we're dealing with digital assets and cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, this is unfortunately quite prevalent on crypto Twitter. Lots of bots trying to get our money. But look, I'll say this: scams in the space are the same as everywhere else. A scam is a scam. Someone takes your money, it doesn't give you value in return. So if you go in the cryptocurrency world, just understand what you're doing, and you won't be scammed. Every time I have been scammed at the beginning of my journey, was because I was blindly trusting a third party that would have control over the asset I was buying. Right. So if you buy your Bitcoin, at first you would go to an exchange, go to a renowned exchange, go to a Coinbase, a Binance, a Kraken, one that is regulated wherever you live, and you will not be scammed. You will be able to own that Bitcoin in property, transfer it out of the exchange to your wallet. And once you have it in your wallet, you know that it's yours. And then the rest of it is exactly like the rest of the digital world. which is, don't share your password, don't put screenshots of private information. Be careful when you think you're talking to support. Always double check the URLs, the website you're being redirected to. Make sure it's the authentic domain of the service you want to use. But it's the same basic cybersecurity rules you have to follow with every other service. Like your bank. Every advice your bank gives you not to be scammed applies to crypto as well. And there's not much more to it.
And I agree with that. I mean, I think it's wise to state that you have to take digital precautions, like cyber precautions, right? So maybe using a VPN or I like to recommend to my students to use Brave browser to, when you're on an exchange, I like to use a separate computer, a separate dedicated device altogether. I don't like to really make large purchases on my phone or anything like that doesn't have a VPN or that isn't used through a safe browser, a secure browser, because I like to minimize the chance that someone will hack in, because it's possible and guess what? Like, we live in a digital age, right? We all use computers, we use our mobile phones, we're glued to them half the time. So this is just the next evolution. And I want to say that so I just had a birthday, right? Surprise, surprise, I turned 50. So that's half a century. So I was alive at the turn of the century when people were really afraid of Y2K. They thought the whole, computer system was going to shut down. People were really afraid. Like, thought it was the end of the world. And we just saw this with this rapture thing that just happened a week ago, where people thought it was the end of the world, right? So people get afraid and they start thinking it's the end of the world. Snail mail came. So there was a time in my life we didn't have email. And then people were like, oh, snail mail, like, that's the mail. I don't like this email stuff. That's never going to catch on. And look, we all have email, right? With, the internet came, everybody was afraid of the web, the cloud. Like, you follow me on this. This is like people being afraid. And we talked about this at the beginning of the episode. But notice everything that I mentioned, except for Y2K, that is in existence today. And it has been evolving. So digital assets, as I like to call them, which include digital finance, which is a thing. It's the same thing as finance, but in the digital space. Cryptocurrencies, which I like to call digital assets because that's what they are. NFTs, all of these things, and things that are upcoming that have not really come out yet. Like digitized real estate on the blockchain and things of that nature that are coming that most people are unaware of. The point I'm trying to make right now is, while you sit there and you are afraid and you are skeptical and you're thinking it's not going to last and it's a passing trend, quietly, secretly, almost behind the scenes, it's growing. And just because you don't know that it's growing and evolving because you're in your fear and denial phase, okay, doesn't mean it's not happening. So I love you and I want you to live your best life possible. So I'm breaking it down with my friend Camille here for you so that you can understand that this is happening, whether you get involved or not. Get on the train, or you're going to get left behind. Okay. It's up to you. It's your choice. Okay. But what I'm telling you is, if you think it's a trend, if you think it's going to go away, it's not. Which brings me to my next question. I've been hearing all this news about high-level investment firms, the Wall Street kind, and all the big stock market people. Let's say, for example, a BlackRock, right? They are creating these things that are tools for their clients to be able to invest in this market. They call them ETFs. Why are they doing that? Why would these high-level investment firms suddenly be interested in Bitcoin and Ethereum?
Right. So, right, so you have two levels of interest. You have the investment firms themselves, and we have their customers, which are actually buying shares in the ETFs. And the number one reason, surprisingly, I've discovered doing my own investigation, but it makes sense, is the first big buyers of the ETFs were the first Bitcoiners themselves that have a large quantity of Bitcoin in their pockets. And the problem with having a large quantity of Bitcoin for 10 years, and over these 10 years the price has increased dramatically, is it poses security issues, much like having a big pile of gold in your house. It takes less space, right? But if someone knows you have it, you become a target. And so the ETFs are a great way at first for these people that already had Bitcoin and understood it to essentially deposit the Bitcoin under the security of those firms, which have protocols and people in place and cannot be coerced. Right. So even if someone snatches you off the street and extorts your Bitcoin, if it's in an ETF, they won't be able to get access to it. So you cease to be a target. And these were the early adopters of it. People, individuals, and companies alike. Now what we're seeing as well, the reason we're still seeing a pretty decent inflow, more than decent, actually an amazing inflow of capital going into these ETFs, is because more and more established investors, these are private fortune individuals, treasury companies, not treasury companies, sorry, companies that want to add Bitcoin to their balance sheets, but don't want to have to deal with the complexity of holding the asset itself, are throwing more and more capital towards Bitcoin. And they're doing what we all ought to do if we haven't done it already, which is to get off zero. These people are allocating a lot of money to our standard, but to their standard, it's 1 to 2% of their available cash or their net worth, if we're talking about individuals. So they're not taking a huge risk, but they recognize the huge potential that it has, and they want to start being accustomed to it to make bigger bets in the future if they see that this potential materializes. So this is why the individuals are going into these financial products, ETFs, and now ETPs of all kinds. Then the BlackRocks of this world, they have understood as well that exactly what you said, it's not a trend, it's not a phase, it's not going away. It's actually a new asset class. And this is how they are selling it publicly, if you've seen them on some money talk shows. And this is how they sell it to their customers as well. It's decorrelated from many other assets in many ways. So if you already have some real estate, equity, publicly traded stock, anything else, you might, some art, whatever, you might want to diversify a little bit more, putting a portion of your holdings into these quality cryptos. And you realize that they are going the same way I recommended earlier, which is in pretty much historical order of the creation of those assets. So they're going Bitcoin, then ETF, and now they're starting to touch some other ones. But right now, from what I can see, the ETF applications are all touching the top 15 cryptos that exist out there, classified by per market cap. Right? Nobody is taking a gamble on unknown coin for fun, on some new network that was born yesterday.
Right, because they want to be safe. So I like to tell people that maybe getting involved with an ETF could be a good, safer, like if you are risk averse, meaning you're really afraid of the space, but you're curious and you want to get involved because you feel like you've got FOMO, right? But you're a little bit scared to like dive right in. This could be a good way for you to enter this space and feel a little bit more secure, a little bit more safe, because these big investment firms, they're not, they don't want to lose, they want to make money, right? So if you're looking at it that way, why would they get involved if they thought that it was a waste of time and money? They wouldn't. And that brings me to my next question. So regulations. Okay. My question is about different governments are now looking at this, right? They have been. The US has been a little bit dragging on looking at this and sort of fighting against it. But I think that we have seen, especially with the new administration, that at least in this space, the interest has accelerated and that the tide has turned to a more digital asset friendly environment. So with the Genius Act, that has made a lot of things a lot more possible. But regulation does exist to also protect the consumer. So, but regulation can be good and bad. So, how does this affect the investor?
So regulation indeed is there, always sold to us as protecting the consumer. Then you have to go into the details of the actual measures taken. But it's a good thing that they want, when they put regulation on the services that will help you acquire the assets, I see it as a very good thing. These services should not promise the ability for you to redeem assets they don't actually have in reserve. The whole reason Bitcoin was created is because we lost trust into the banking system in 2008 since they abused the fractional reserve system. Right. On top of this was a lot of derivatives that brought about the crisis. But then when we decided it was time to settle and stop the music for a moment and count who has what, everything came to a stop, because even the dollars that you see in the ATM for your bank account were not actually there. So in crypto, the whole point is that there is one for one. You can't leverage a fractional reserve. The legislation that is put in place right now is about how they serve you as a customer to make sure that they don't do this with your money. The Genius Act that Kia mentioned specifically regulated stablecoins because stablecoins will be the blood that will irrigate this whole crypto space. For a sector to thrive, it needs to be as liquid as possible. Now, if I take the housing market that most people understand, it's extremely liquid. You don't actually know truly the price of your house until you've sold it. Right? There's a lot of factors that come into play. So there's the market ask, which is what everybody knows. Everybody can read a price tag, but then what it's sold for is usually 20, 30% away from, often it is 20, 30% away from the asking price. So what is the real value of a home, depending on where it is? With the stable coins, the idea is to say that many private companies, well capitalized, can essentially create digital representations of the dollar, since we're talking about the US with this act, and distribute it on the different crypto networks. So then you can use them in exchanges, in decentralized finance services, which we call DeFi. You can earn yield, you can authorize loans, you can do all kinds of conversions, and this allows this whole sector to be fluid and for people to trade easily. Right. So regarding the Genius Act, to tell you that there is value in this sector and the big boys know it and they're doing everything in their power to stop us from realizing. The big debate around the Genius Act, the reason it took so many discussions to pass through Senate particularly, was that the banks were lobbying heavily to forbid, to put in the legislation that it would be unauthorized to create yield on stablecoin, right? Because what they want to do is for you to deposit your capital not on a network and go get the yield yourself once you know how it works and you're educated. They want you to go to their savings account, deposit it there. They will give you 1%, 2%, 3% and make 10, 12, 14 on your back. Right. So, and now that we have another act coming up in October, it should pass in October, and it should be in the news now. The infrastructure bill, the name eludes me now. What's it called? Yeah, we had the Genius Act, and now we have the new one, the one that is supposed to pass soon. Does it ring a bell? Okay.
It does, but I can't think of the name of it at the moment.
I've been saying it all week, and now I can't think of it.
We can Google it. We'll put it in the show notes later.
So this act is essentially about putting the regulation in place, the detailed regulation. So which type of crypto would be a security, which type would be a commodity, so that we can determine which legal body supervises the trading of that asset, the SEC or the CFTC. And from there, all the rules fall into place, and all the financial actors can interact with crypto, offer services, and they don't have to worry about unpredictable fines. So this new act, I can't get it. So this new act should put that last milestone, so that the whole sector becomes as structured as your traditional sectors, and it really becomes then a new part of the economy. And this for the US is particularly interesting, but I think this is one of the questions you have for me down the line.
Definitely. I was looking up, I was going to Google the name of the act, but maybe I will find that in a minute and we'll come back to it. So I think it's really important that people understand now that the government, our government and governments around the world are moving forward with regulating and making rules on how this is going to work. Right.
Yes.
And I wanted to discuss that as a way to support the fact that I said earlier that this is not going anywhere. Why would something get regulated? Why would it go to the government to make decisions about it if it was a trend or a passing fad or something like that? My point is, I'm trying to help people understand that you are missing something here. You don't know what you don't know, but now you do. And so now that you do know that this is not a passing trend, that this is not a fad, we understand that you are afraid, but there are measures that you can take to keep yourself as safe as possible, right? Now I would like to help people to understand what to do, right? So we talked about getting some Bitcoin. How would a person begin to set up a portfolio? And on the back of that question, what percentage of their portfolio, their entire portfolio, should be in a digital asset or digital assets?
Okay, sure. So once you've, if I've convinced you, or once you've done your own due diligence on research, you can basically, what I would say is just start playing with it. You don't have to use a lot of money. You can play around with $10, $20, $50. It just should be enough so that you care, but not so much that you lose sleep over it. Right? This is where the sweet spot is for you to actually go through the initial process of conquering your fear. The initial fear I see in most people is the technical one. I need to set up an account on an exchange. I have to go through my KYC, know your customer. It sounds daunting when we talk about crypto, but it's the exact same process you go through when you open a bank account. So really, it takes 2-3 days for them to confirm some information you give about yourself, and you can operate in an exchange. Then how to operate an exchange, it looks complicated because they love putting a lot of information on the screen because it's designed to want to make you trade. So it moves everywhere. It's like a casino, moves everywhere. It has nice colors, lights. But try to ignore this noise and just understand how you can buy and sell something on that exchange. It's actually very easy. You can find a 1 to 2 minute tutorial on YouTube in an initial search. Once you've done that, you've gone half of the way. And once you've bought a bit of Bitcoin or any other asset on that exchange, try to see how you can set up a wallet, transfer your assets or part of it to that wallet. And once you've done it once or twice, you will realize that it's very easy. It's actually very similar to doing a bank transfer. And it just goes a lot faster. And it's usually cost a lot less to do. So this is what I would recommend people do. Just understand the tech by doing this, and this is a 2 weeks process without pushing it. Anything else is really about financial literacy. So the whole point of crypto at first was to make the individual sovereign with their finance, meaning you understand why it has value, where the value is, how you can exchange it. and being in full control of it, hence the permissionless. And once you have that in your hands, I mean, nothing can stop you. Then it's all about education. Then you understand about the sector, you start knowing the big actors that are playing in this sector, you start becoming actually knowledgeable about the space, and you make your bet. If you've never invested in your name, if you've always delegated it, you feel like you don't, you feel like you don't have the intelligence for it, perhaps, or you don't have the other courage. Some people are just really scared, even though they know they have the brains for it. And I would say you need to take a leap of faith, like I did. Honestly, I was not educated to be an investor or an entrepreneur. I was not trained on the financial sector ever. I did everything on my own, and nothing has been as good to me as getting this knowledge. It helps me multiply my savings over time compared to what I would have done with traditional vehicles. It has helped me as well understand how to invest in my own name, and it makes you, it empowers you. I really don't know how to say it better. It just empowers you. And the whole point of this is to be free, right? But with freedom, to quote Spider-Man's uncle, with freedom, or with great freedom comes great power. Great freedom comes great responsibility. And the thing is, as you do this, the more you do this, and the more value it has, the more you need to understand how to keep your information secure, organized, be disciplined about the decisions you're making and the time in which you're executing those decisions. So you want to go progressively into it. You don't want it to be overwhelming, and you don't want it to be too much of a burden, because it is a responsibility that you put upon yourself. But all the rewards are yours as well. And it's not nearly as complicated as starting a business, hiring people, going to get customers. You just need to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And this is something that I think we should really all be educated on, because it turns you from being passive in many aspects of life to being active, and all of a sudden realize that you can set your life in a direction you would have not dreamed of a few years prior. And that's been my journey, at least, and is the one I recommend to my family and friends. So I hope you can take that advice.
Excellent. That was extraordinary advice. And I really love all of it, actually. And so I'm going to say that, the reason I really felt that it was important to do this episode was because I was on YouTube, as I often am, watching stuff, because I'm always learning something. And I stumbled upon some news about the United States, actually, and the use of stablecoins, and the fact that, according to the news, there was a Russian intelligence officer who found some information about the United States and what they were intending to do with stablecoins. I'm not going to go into all of that, because that's for you to do your own research and find that information. But what I would like to say is, let's dive a little bit into stablecoins and find out why they're important, and why would the US government think that they would be important. I guess that's a good enough question. And also, was the act you were thinking of the Clarity Act? Because that's the only one that,
Correct.
okay, that's the only one I could think of, that other than the Genius Act.
That's the one.
Yeah. Okay, so and by the way, you can look up, people don't do this enough. You can go online to the government and actually read what all of these measures are that are in the act, so that you can get familiar with that, and know what's passing, and not have to take someone else's word for it, right? But let's go back to our question. Okay, what is a stablecoin, and why would the United States government be interested in it, or any government, actually?
So how do I answer this one? So you have four pillars that you really need to understand, because they articulate together, and this is what the United States government is interested. The first one is stablecoins. How do they work? Not technically, but the companies that manage them. The second one is understanding where the dollar is coming from and where it needs to go, right? And then this Russian intelligence agent, I think I know which one you're mentioning, or which video clip you're mentioning. He's talking about a reset of the US debt. And this is indeed how the world can view it. I'll give you my opinion on it, but of course, this is all done behind closed doors, so we can only speculate. And then the last one is understanding why the digital economy is going to accrue a more value over the next decade and beyond, probably, than what we would call the real economy of actual goods and services exchanged outside of the online world. You can never get that. Yeah. So the first one is stablecoins. The way stablecoins are created by private companies that essentially buy treasury assets from governments. So they would buy US treasury bills for a certain amount, and then they would be able to emit this amount of dollar digital representation as crypto on different crypto networks, so that DeFi can be liquid. And they have turned over time. You might have heard of Tether. That's the company behind USDT. And you might have heard as well of Consensus, the company behind USDC. And Tether in particular has become a major buyer of US Treasury bills. I don't want to say number one, but I think they are, or they have been in the recent past. And the government realizes that by providing the debt to these companies, they essentially find a gigantic new demand for the dollar, so they can keep printing, keep irrigating the economy when they need to, and a vast majority of that liquidity will be absorbed by these actors to put value into liquid value into the digital economy. So that's one. That's how it works behind the scenes. The second would be, what did I say? The second would be the US dollar. Where does it come from? So in its current form, the US dollar has been, for the past 2 decades, a little bit over it, has been backed, which people say backed by oil, right? The term the petrodollar comes from that setup. So essentially what happened is in the 70s, the US government managed to strike deals with the main oil providers in the world, especially Saudi Arabia, to make it so that they would only accept to sell their oil for US dollars. So every other nation on earth would be in the obligation to hold US dollar in its reserve if it wanted to be able to buy oil in large enough quantities for its economy. So that's where the vast majority of the demand still comes from, and has been coming from for the past, well, I'll say 2, but really it's more like 3-4 decades. And this is coming to an end now. There is a rebalancing of power geopolitically. So the US is kind of, I would say, losing its might militarily. It's not really that it's losing it, it's just it's deciding to not project it so much, because when you do so, when you project your military power all over the world to hold everyone under your set of rules, you're essentially an empire, right? And no judgment here. I'm just describing the technique, so to speak. And so holding an empire, beating an empire is extremely, extremely expensive. And now the US has decided to turn back towards its internal policy, and spend less on being an empire. It's transitioning back to being a nation. So it needs to find a way to do so without having all those dollars that are outside of the US flooding back to the US Treasury over a short period of time, because that would create a lot of inflation, right? It's one thing when it's to settle the balance of commerce. So if the US is a net exporter to any other country, and the dollars come back as the balance of the commercial balance at the end of the year, then the Treasury can decide to destroy those monetary signs, and there's no effect of inflation in the US economy, the continental US economy. But if it comes back in the form of goods and services being bought from outside the US, because all of a sudden the dollar is becoming cheap, so there's a race towards beating inflation by spending, then these dollars come into circulation in the US economic circuit, and it becomes very complicated for the central bank to do its job of maintaining the inflation rate under a certain level. So to counteract that effect, which is pretty much impossible to, you can't decide what every economic actor in the world will do, then the government is seeing an option here to mitigate the effects and potentially reinforce the dollar for another few decades at least. So they are making the US a crypto nation, so that everybody in the world understands that if you transact with a dollar or a digital dollar, when it comes to the US, it will be recognized as one and the same. You will not be discriminated against for paying with a crypto dollar. And this will enable the demand to come from that digital space. And that's why the US is at the forefront right now of legitimizing this space. And it has a reason to be beyond just the geopolitical interest, which is that the moment you make something better by being easier to transfer, by being harder to censor, harder to confiscate, you will naturally accrue value towards that space. If a painting from a master would be impossible to counterfeit, technically impossible to do so, the value of those paintings would probably be higher than it is today. But because because copies, not digital, because copies exist, it hurts the value of the original one because it's so hard to authenticate. Right? The same thing happens with gold. When countries pay each other in gold, if you know about the history of gold, there are so many scams with actual real gold that you hold in your hand. They would put tungsten inside the bars and send that to central banks. It has happened. So you can get robbed, of course, pretty easily. Pretty easily in the physical world, because the moment someone can get into the vault and out with the gold, then that's it. The advantage of digital assets that can be secured with good cryptography, and if you maintain your passcode secure, no one can take it from you, right? And because it's digital, it's weightless. So you can go across any border and nobody can confiscate it from you. Nobody can even know that you have it. So these are all use cases that make a lot of sense for these crypto digital assets to become a new major sector in the economy. The reason the Russian intelligence is saying that there's going to be a reset is because they're seeing this rebalancing happening. So when they say there's going to be a reset, they don't mean that the dollar is going to zero or go into hyperinflation and a new dollar will come out, which is what I've seen on many comments on Twitter. It makes absolutely no sense to me. What really is happening is the consumption of the dollar in the world is going to change. The habit of consumption of that dollar is going to change. And the value will accrue towards these new habits of consumption. Which brings us to the last pillar, which is the crypto nation. The US right now is working fast and intensively to become the nation where real assets are being digitized. So I'll go back to the example of the house again. That's the holy grail everybody wants to digitize. It's complicated because what you do in the digital world needs somehow to be transcribed in the physical world. And you can't really divide a house up and say that each brick in my house makes the total value of the house. It needs to come together to have value. But in the digital world, you can essentially create the real world assets that is your house. You create a digital representation on the blockchain, and that becomes a fragmented property title. So you can start selling your house or land equity of that house in pieces, making it liquid. Again, it's all about making things liquid. So this is what the US is working heavily towards. The house is a difficult example because it's a house, but you can do this with all kinds of property titles. You can do this with contracts of all kinds. It can be a trade agreement. It can be an inheritance title. It can be a lease for anything. You can digitize that and monetize it somehow, and then becomes exactly like the rest of the financial market, where you have derivatives of everything and anything under the sun, so people can trade it without having to exchange the asset physically.
Wow. So that was such a great explanation and very detailed, which I hope didn't lose anyone, but rewind it, play it again over and over and over until it starts to sink in. Okay. And I'm going to give you a big takeaway from that. Remember when I told you there was a digital gold rush coming and it was secret? Well, he just exposed it. And if you didn't catch on, right? We're talking about strap in for the next 10 to 15 years. Okay. And you are going to see, I want you to think for a moment if you remember the start of cell phones, or if you remember the start of the computer, and what 15 years from the start of that was like. What I remember, those big block cell phones in the 1980s. You used to see them in movies, or car phones. People used to have phones in their car, right? And we would see these things, right? And we knew that they were cellular. I mean, we didn't understand what cellular was, right? Now, then we saw the computer, okay? And it was this big old thing. Like, it was crazy, right? Now we have it, right? We have it in our hand, right? We have a computer in our hand that is also a phone, okay? So think of what could happen in this space in the next 10 to 15 years. And now think of what the US tying the dollar to a digital asset looks like over that time span. Okay. So I guess the point is what I'm trying to tell you, if you haven't picked it up yet, is this is a space you want to get involved in now. And remember how I promised you I was going to tell you how to get involved if you were working class, or, and Camille said this a little bit earlier, if you didn't catch it. He said, take $10, $20, $15, $100, and make a small investment. If you do that every month, the cost of your coffee just went up. And if you're in the United States, you know what I'm talking about. We're talking about inflation. You feel that inflation because if you are like me, you saw your grocery bill jump up by like $100 a week. Okay. So you understand inflation, right? The cost of your coffee just went up. Take that coffee from Starbucks that you spend every day or every week or every month, and take that little budget and put it somewhere where it can grow. That is what I'm trying to tell you. I love you. You guys are my hotties. You're my friends. I want the best for you. I want you to be living your best life possible. And this is one way you can do just that. An easy way to get involved in something cutting edge and new. You do need to learn. You do need to do your own research. It's like learning a new language. Trust me, it really is. And I know you're going to be like, I'm not good at math. I get it. You don't have to be good at math. You don't have to understand finance completely to just start to learn. There's tons of influencers in this space. I'm really hoping Camille will become one after this podcast. And there's so many influencers you can follow on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and all over the place. Look, Crypto Phil popped up. Hi, Crypto Phil. Thanks for joining. I hope you'll share this episode and fact check us. Drop a comment if you think we're right, if you think you're wrong, or if you want to add to what we're talking about today, since it seems like you're knowledgeable in the space. Otherwise, why would your name be Crypto Phil? Okay, but hi and welcome. So with that, Camille, I just have one last question and we're going to wrap it up because we're a little bit over time, but this is so fascinating to me. Okay, that I need to just ask one last question because I know sometimes people have businesses. And you mentioned earlier that businesses were getting involved, right? But we were talking about huge businesses now putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet, meaning they count it as an asset, okay, when they're doing their accounting. Right. So, how can smaller businesses, like maybe mid-size or smaller, get involved in this space?
Well, believe it or not, I have a good friend of mine right now that is doing it as well. And the reason he's buying his crypto through his business is because it opens a whole world of tax optimization that multiply your gains over time when you decide to move that money and put it to use eventually. But if you're a small business, it's pretty much the same as being an individual. You go as well on an exchange, you do your KYC, but this time you put your company's detail and you link it to your company's bank account, and you can start operating with crypto. Before you do anything, real important advice here is you want to talk to a CPA wherever you are to understand what the tax regulation is. The main difference I found between different jurisdictions, for example, where I reside, I can, as a business or individual, I can buy a crypto, decide to change it to another crypto or to a stable coin at any point in time. And as long as I jump from crypto to crypto, it's not a taxable event. It's not considered capital gains realized to then reinvest in a different asset. But in many parts of the world, it is the case. It would be considered as selling, realizing capital gains or losses, and investing in a new asset, and the clock resets. So these are the nuances you want to be well aware of before you start investing as a business to avoid surprises. But then in terms of executing, it's really the same as being an individual. Be on point with your security, keeping your passwords, because as it's not a centralized service, once you leave the exchange, once you own things on chain, you are your own bank. You are responsible for the security, for recovering your account, for accessing it, for absolutely everything. So if you lose your password or your seed phrase, you will come to know what that is if you read the book. In that case, nobody can give it back to you. So it's the ultimate way of taking full responsibility for your financial life. But I'd say that's the cost of freedom. It's a small one. It's a small one. Small price to pay. Nowadays, it's easy to manage information. If I can just take 1 minute, I'd like to leave your audience with two anecdotes that will make them understand the perspective you developed earlier. Few people know this, but the very first company to have developed a digital camera is Kodak. And they decided to kill it because they couldn't see how they could sell their film if they started putting digital cameras out there. So in order to not kill their business, they waited for the competition to do it for them, which of course had the exact same outcome. And that's lack of perspective, right? And to come back to what Kia was saying about the early days of the cell phones, that's a very good parallel with crypto. Because if you look at the history of cell phones, they came into the market. First, we had the closest thing to a smartphone that was in the market and dominating for a long time was BlackBerry. And BlackBerry became infamously known a few years after their demise for their executive, their CEO, actually saying that nobody wants a touch screen because nobody wants to leave fingerprints all over the screen they're looking at. So they want a keyboard, and they decided to stick to it. So that's one. But then on top of it, when the Apple first iPhone came out, and then the competition, for the longest time, the adoption of smartphones was really for people that wanted to manage their email on the go, more business case related users. But then one application came out that completely changed the game, and absolutely everybody from 12 to 99 years old wanted to have a smartphone. And that application was Instagram. You look at when Instagram came out and the sale of smartphones throughout the world, the correlation is uncanny. It shoots up when people wanted to onboard Instagram. And this is what we are waiting for, I'd say, in crypto. We're waiting for the Instagram moment. But if you're in a space, you can sense that it is not far away. I don't know if it's a few months, maybe a couple of years, but it's not a decade away. And this is why I take urgent action every time I can on getting a better crypto portfolio. And I absolutely recommend you do so as well, starting with a little bit of Bitcoin just to understand how it works.
Excellent. Excellent. So I want to say thank you so much, Camille, for coming today and being a guest. And I really hope that everyone who watches this, all my friends and hotties that follow this podcast, can understand like the intention behind this episode. And that is to alert people to a big change that's coming that they may not see, they may be afraid of, but that's coming nonetheless. And how to get involved now so that in the next 5 or 10 years, they can see financial benefit from this space before it becomes too late, because it will. For the everyday person, this is my warning. I need like some ominous music playing in the background. This is my warning to you right now. So come here and listen very closely. There is going to come a time where everyday people like you and me are not going to be able to get into this space. Okay? Think of it like the stock price gets so high, the average person can't buy in. It will happen, but not yet. So heed my warning. Get involved. Do your due diligence, of course. Don't just take my word for it, but do real research. Start learning. If I can just encourage you to start learning and start with maybe 3 things: Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a stablecoin. Just start there. Doesn't take much. And start learning. And of course, my ebook will help you. And there's lots of creators and content providers out there. So be very careful on who you choose to follow also, because some people are backed to give particular advice that may not be the most helpful for you. Let's just leave it at that. So be cautious on who you follow. Do your due diligence. And as always, if you have questions or comments, drop them in the comments below. I do read my comments at least once a month. I do try to answer everybody. If you want to reach me, you can also send me a DM on Hot Topics Live Podcast on Instagram. It's right there. And if you want to connect with Camille and you want to hear more from him, you will find him on LinkedIn. Okay. But definitely start having the conversation. When you get started, people will think you're crazy. Ignore them. That's just external resistance. Do this for yourself. Do this for your family. Do this for your future generations even. But do it. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. So I want to say thank you so much again, Camille. Is there anything else you wanted to share or anything you want to promote you have going on?
Look, no, really, I'm not selling anything. I'm just here to share knowledge, and it's a privilege and an honor to do so with your audience. So thank you again for the invitation, really.
Well, I hope you'll come back and we'll talk some more about it and help people along the way a little further. So again, thank you. I'm going to put you in the green room, and if you have time to wait for me, I'll see you in a few minutes while after I'm done wrapping up the show.
Of course.
Wasn't that wonderful? I know a lot of it was techie and probably a little bit confusing, but I encourage you, watch the episode again, listen, 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 and then start finding tools and research and learning. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or X, whatever they call it these days. I'm not on there really. And wherever, YouTube, of course, anywhere you go to find information and just start studying. And if you want more guidance, like you just don't want to do that on your own and you want something tangible that you can use to help you, just wait for my ebook. It will be dropping in about a month. I'm wrapping it up. It's almost ready. So stay tuned for that. The link will appear here on this episode, and it will be on all future episodes of Hot Topics Live podcast once it goes live. And believe me, I'm going to do a whole episode about it and everything. So stay tuned for that. And now you know what time it is. It's that part of the show where I do something very special for anyone who's still watching. And by the way, if you're still watching and you made it this far, you're part of the tribe. You're part of the hotties. You're one of my dear friends, and you should subscribe. And set your notifications so you know when I come live, because I never know when I come live. I just do it. And then you'll know and you'll be notified when there's a new episode. So definitely subscribe and set your notifications. It's the little bell by now. You know that, right? Comment and engage, because you know that algorithm requires engagement. And this, what I'm doing now, we're going to play a little cards. I'm going to get you a message from the Soul Truth Self Awareness card deck by Brianne Hovey. Shout out to her for these messages. And I want you to take a breath and just, sometimes I like to put my hand on my heart and just take a breath, focus my energy in, almost like a little meditation. And right now, this is going to be a message from, I don't know, your higher self, your God, whatever that is for you, source energy, the universe. I don't know. This is an open, judgment-free zone. We are accepting here. We are loving here. And there's a message that's going to come out. I'm shuffling these cards up, and the message is going to fly out at random. And that is your message just for you. And there we go. Your message today is, where am I with my health goals? Where do I want to be? Why am I not there? What will it take for me to feel well? So somebody out there is worried about their health, right? It could be you. It's a little bit me too. If my body could talk, it would say, what? What would your body say if it could talk to you right now? Mine would say, work on mobility because you're 50 now, honey. So make sure, though, you don't need a hip replacement anytime soon. And so do your mobility training and weight training, okay? Because women at my age and men should be really focused on those two things. Okay, so today, I know I don't look 50, but I know that's what you were thinking. Everyone's been telling me all week. Thank you. I love you for that. Today's soul action: feed your body what it needs to feel nourished, appreciated, and loved. Make some new exciting goals and take your health to the next level. And that is your message. Also, a personal message from me: don't let fear keep you from being financially secure in the new digital age. It's coming, whether you accept it or not. So I love you. I appreciate you for your time and for watching. I hope you will subscribe and set your notifications so you know when I come live. I have an update on my Dating After Divorce podcast. I'm going to be doing an episode next week, so definitely set your notifications for that. I have an amazing lineup of great guests coming for you for all different topics, hence Hot Topics Live. This is a live podcast. You can be involved in the live if you drop a comment while I'm live. Otherwise, you can watch it in the replay and you can comment then too. Anything you need to know is in the description box below. One last thing before I go. My pinup, if you like pretty pictures, you like classy, sexy images, is my last cover, then you can follow me on any one of these places, actually mainly at Creativity. That's my private Instagram account because I love Instagram. And you can follow along with all the podcasts I do, the Female Veterans Podcast, Hot Topics Live Podcast. Go and follow there. You can subscribe at the Female Veterans Podcast YouTube channel, which I'm just kind of getting off the ground. And then, of course, you can see all my pretty pictures and content on my Instagram, because you're never too old to pursue a dream. Okay. And I'm just getting started. So with that, I want to say thank you for watching. I love you guys, and I'll talk to you next time.